What's up, you guys? Today's animated series review is about a group of flying creatures who become nighttime protectors while trying to gain the acceptance, trust, and respect of humans after constant broken promises and betrayals. And I'm talking about the Gargoyles. Gargoyles, the animated series, aired in 1994, containing 3 seasons with a total of 78 episodes. The story begins with a flashback from 994 AD in Scotland as a war is taking place between two clans as Vikings are attacking Castle Whyvern. As an advantage, one clan is protected and aided by these statues called Gargoyles, led by their leader Goliath, whom are stoned by day and alive at night. Despite being useful allies, a princess named Catherine, along with a resourceful wizard Magus, and other refugees consider the Gargoyles to be dangerous, unnatural creatures. However, the captain of all the guards usually honors them in defense. So when Goliath and his mentor were sent on a mission to attack the leader of the Vikings named Haken to prevent another invasion, they realized it was a decoy for them to leave the castle unguarded. Upon trying to return in time before the sun peaks through the horizon, unfortunately they were too late as they were turned to stone, leaving them at a disadvantage for half the day. During the attack, we discover it was the captain himself who was the ultimate betrayer, as he was working with Haken this whole time, and watching the remaining gargoyles being destroyed while being defenseless was extremely heartbreaking. By the time the other two awoke later that night, Castle Whyvern had been brutally invaded, and seeing how they were ultimately betrayed, when Goliath heads to his so-called rookery brothers and sisters as pieces on the ground, this left him with the utmost anger and vengeance. Later, he miraculously finds out that some did survive the invasion, but after some miscommunications with Magus, Princess Catherine, Haken, and the captain, Magus ends up casting a spell permanently stoning the remaining survivors, blaming them for the death of Princess Catherine, until realizing she was still alive. Despite supposedly finishing off Haken and the captain, a distraught and furious Goliath insists to be stoned as well since he is of no use without his brothers, regardless of understanding Magus's guilt, and will sleep until Castle Whyvern rises above the clouds. Now fast forwarding to the year 1994, a man that goes by the name David Xanatos decides to purchase the castle and all the remaining imprisoned gargoyles as souvenirs for his tower in New York City. When placing them at the highest peak of the tower, the spell of eternal sleep is uplifted as the 6 gargoyles are now fully awake, thus beginning the story of their brand new journey in the city that never sleeps. Within the first few episodes, Xanatos tries to explain the story to Goliath about how they ended up in New York, and although Goliath is still dealing with grief and trust issues, Xanatos affirms he's an ally. So when the city is alarmed when stones are falling from the sky, a detective named Elisa Maza becomes skeptical of this incident and tries to dig up some information since she herself doesn't trust Xanatos. Elisa eventually discovers the gargoyles and befriends them despite Goliath's concern towards humans. As time goes by, we learn that the gargoyles can't really fly as they're mostly dependent on the currents of the wind. Their eyes glow white when they're pissed, and when they're turned to stone, it rejuvenates their health. As the rest of the clan becomes optimistic of their new living arrangements after some exploration, they each decide to give themselves their own unique names. So within the Gargoyles, aka the Manhattan clan, you have Goliath, the noble and courageous leader; Hudson, the old yet wise mentor of Goliath; Brooklyn, the level-minded one who eventually becomes second in command; Broadway, the somewhat silly yet warm-hearted one who's always hungry; Lexington, the smallest yet smartest of the group with his interest in technology; and Bronx, the faithful beast-like pet. As for the human allies, you mostly have Elisa Maza, a reliable police detective who eventually develops feelings for Goliath, and although she's the only one seen the most, you also have others like Matt Bluestone, Elisa's partner who's basically obsessed with the Illuminati, along with Princess Catherine, Magus, Jeffrey Robbins, Tom, and some historical names like King Arthur and Odin. And last but not least, you have some other gargoyle/mutated creatures like Coldstone, a combination of 3 gargoyles captured into one cyberbiotic body; Coldfire, a female gargoyle and 1/3 of Coldstone; Angela, the only female to join the gargoyles who's also Goliath's and Demona's daughter; the Labyrinth clan led by Talon, previously known as Derek Maza, Elisa's brother who unfortunately is mutated after the betrayal of Xanatos and Dr. Savarius, along with his love interest Maggie and Claw; the clone species, created by Dr. Savarius, who are basically clones of the gargoyles, and Elisa, named Delilah, Burbank, Hollywood, Brentwood, and Malibu; the London clan, consisting of members Griff, Una, and Leo; the Japanese Ishimura clan, consisting of members Sora, Kai, and Yama; the Mayan clan, consisting of members Hade, Zafiro, Turquesa, and Obsidiana; the Avalon clan, consisting of members Boudica, Gabriel, and Ophelia; and various characters from the New Olympian race like Taurus. As for the villains, we have David Xanatos, the richest and most sadistic villain I've ever seen. Owen Burnett, Xanatos' personal assistant. Mr. Renard, the CEO of a company called Cyberbiotics. Preston Vogel, the personal assistant to Mr. Renard. The Pack, a group once known as famous TV stars but later turned evil and also mutated into half-cybernetic humanoids consisting of members Hyena, Jackal, Dingo, Wolf, and Fox, who later becomes Xanatos' wife. Dr. Anton Savarius, the evil scientist, Macbeth, a tough adversary for the Gargoyles, and Coyote, an android version of Xanatos and second leader of the Pack after Fox left. As for the Gargoyle villains, you have Demona, Goliath's one second in command and previous love interest, Thailog, a clone of Goliath but also referred to as his son, Cold Steel, 1/3 of the Gargoyles within Coldstone, the Steel Clan, robotic versions of Goliath, Fang, once part of the Labyrinth clan but decided to turn evil, and Little Anton, a giant gargoyle created by Dr. Savarius. Then you have some other human villains like the Hunters, Anthony Dracon, Thomas Brode, Radar, Taro, and the Quarrymen. As for more of the mystical villains, you have the Weird Sisters, Puck, Raven and the Totem Beasts, Banshee, Proteus, the Archmage, Oberon, the leader of Avalon, and Titania, Oberon's wife and surprisingly Fox's mother. As the story progresses, Elisa continues to help Goliath understand the city regarding the crime associated with it, but on the other hand, we slowly start to learn about the characteristics of Xanatos as he tries to use the Gargoyles for his personal gain, involving top-secret missions like stealing discs with important files, a book called the Grimorum Acronorum which contains spells, or the Eye of Odin. Goliath also discovers that Demona had been alive this whole time and is reunited with the clan to aid them on the mission. Although being in disbelief, assuming she had died during the invasion of Castle Whyvern, this news of happiness was short-lived as Goliath starts to sense Demona is acting differently with her behavior towards humans, as her personal vendetta continues to grow with immense hatred. However, despite going through some obstacles assuming all is somewhat well, the Gargoyles find out that Demona was actually working for Xanatos, which basically pisses off Goliath even more. And after trying to get his revenge for both their betrayal, luckily Elisa had some tricks up her sleeve with evidence which allowed Xanatos to head to jail, but that doesn't stop him from making plans to sabotage the clan. Throughout the remainder of the season, aside from saving the city from crime, Goliath continues to be in denial about Xanatos' sentence as Elisa tries to convince him he's rich and powerful enough to reach bail, a concept Goliath hasn't come to terms with. So with that said, despite holding a strong attachment to the castle, Elisa convinces him that it's not a safe place to stay and persuades the group to move to a new location, which ends up being the clock tower above the police station. As time goes on, Xanatos ends up getting out of jail and nonchalantly triggers Goliath's patience when he continues manipulating, framing, and bribing the group with various encounters, one being that he created his own army of gargoyle robots, as well as one for himself for battle to understand their strengths and weaknesses. And while on the subject of Xanatos, without spoiling anything too much, this guy is the master of deception. Not only are his schemes so grand enough to put you in shock, but how it's delivered throughout the show is enough to either applaud him for being extremely smart or yell out in frustration that he's the ultimate bastard. The choice is yours. We're also taken into several other backstories involving Demona as we learn some shocking secrets of her past, as the viewer gets to see her side of the story during the Viking invasion on how she was outcasted by mankind, along with other reasons for not being able to coexist with humans. Not only was it a crucial plot twist, but her actions also create some pivotal storylines involving the Hunters and Macbeth. Upon arriving to Season 2, aside from the new intro, the Gargoyles are now somewhat exposed to the public. Goliath accepts the entire city of Manhattan as his new castle to serve and protect, and this is where the show really kicks you in the ass. With every episode now showcasing flashbacks of previous episodes, it's very crucial to pay attention as it dives heavily into the past to reveal more in-depth storylines of characters. Starting off with the Gargoyles, in one storyline, Demona uses a magical mirror to turn all the humans into stone, and this part was deadly enough to the point where she was actually killing a few, making her insanity develop even more. Seeing how this had to end, Goliath had to team up with Xanatos to put an end to her power, even though this wouldn't be the first time. As a consequence to her treachery, thanks to the trickster Puck, whether you consider this as a punishment or not, she gets the ability to transform into a human during the day as a result to see the human nature of life, something she had not bargained for. With that said, Goliath on the other hand continues to feel lonely, abandoned, and questions his abilities as leader, as well as his disdain towards Xanatos, until he ends up stealing Goliath's DNA to make a clone even after trying to make a truce. This led to the creation of Thailog, aka Goliath's son, who's basically smarter, stronger, and money-driven, which then makes Xanatos second-guess his actions and regret. And this episode was a pretty good cliffhanger. As things start to heat up, Goliath has to face the decision when deciding a second in command at the risk if he were to ever die, and honor that title to Brooklyn after careful observations. But now starting from this point of the season, this is where it gets really complicated as blinking and lack of concentration will leave you confused and clueless. Throughout the remainder of the season, Goliath discovers that the baby eggs he had safeguarded in the past were not destroyed in the attacks of Castle Whyvern. With the excitement and aid of Elisa, Bronx, and Tom, they all head to the magical island of Avalon and are explained of the enchanted powers regarding time and what really happened afterwards involving Tom, his mother Mary, Princess Catherine, and Magus. Upon arriving, Goliath is reunited with now older versions of Princess Catherine and Magus and gets reacquainted with the now hatched and grown-up Avalon clan baby egg survivors. Now having to return home, one of the children named Angela decided to tag along to explore the vast world with them. And from here on out, the show decides to take us on one crazy-ass adventure for the next 20 episodes as Avalon sends them to where they need to be, not where they want to go, throughout the world meeting various characters like other gargoyles, creatures, and mystical forces like Oberon and Titania. By partaking in these numerous quests, it actually served as a purpose for Goliath's destiny involving his past and future. For example, Angela discovers Goliath is her father and Demona is her mother, along with witnessing Demona being brainwashed and now under the charm of Thailog. Goliath's traumatizing visions of all his rookery brothers and sisters being slaughtered is finally put to rest when dealing with the spirits of Haken and the captain at the temple. And then we get one of my favorite story arcs where we see the future of Manhattan, aka Xanatopia, as Xanatos is now the ruler as everything went to shit. A lot of our beloved characters have either aged with disabilities, equipped with armor, building a relationship with Demona, ended up dying in battle, or finding out that Lexington has now become corrupted being the new ruthless villain. As for the humans and other species, this season didn't shy away from dragging you into the intense backstory of Macbeth and his purpose of living in hatred towards Demona, as it's revealed that they both share one soul and the others can't live without the other thanks to the Weird Sisters whom casted a spell which is its own complicated story. Xanatos and Fox end up getting married and eventually have a son named Alexander. Due to certain events, Xanatos ends up becoming an ally to the Gargoyles when they save Alexander a few times as he now understands what his priorities are. And by the time you get near the end of the season, there's a lot of surprises to hit you right in the gut involving family genetics and bloodlines. The last few episodes of Season 2 has a few good entertaining battles between the Gargoyles and the clones plus Demona, the Gargoyles versus Oberon for the ownership of Avalon, and the Gargoyles versus the Hunters, which becomes intense with plot twists left and right. In one of the battles, the clock tower ends up getting destroyed as another battle contains Xanatos reluctantly saving their lives. Because of this, and everyone being on good terms as well as the Gargoyles now being well known throughout the city by the humans, they were welcomed back to their original castle grounds on top of Xanatos' building, claiming to be protectors of the night. By the time we get to Season 3 and the end of the series, we get a new intro as well as new graphics and a different title for the show called The Goliath Chronicles. Before every episode, Goliath gives a narrative foreshadowing certain events. Although it was only 13 episodes, there wasn't much significance for this particular season other than the Gargoyles now being adapted into the public facing other human threats like the Quarrymen, or Goliath being an honest citizen and paying his dues in court rather than escaping for a fair trial. Elisa and Goliath's relationship continues to blossom as they're both well aware of their feelings towards each other but still remains complicated as they're both two different species, despite her family being aware that her friends are gargoyles. In one episode, we get to see an incident of Goliath being human and living a normal life to put things in perspective, and the outcome to remain human or gargoyle remains in question. But those aren't the only two in love, as Broadway and Angela, who's now an official member of the clan, are now in a relationship which unfortunately makes Brooklyn jealous and heartbroken for the second time after Maggie left him for Talon. As for Xanatos, Fox, and Alexander, despite starting a bit rough in terms of harassments because they're sheltering the Gargoyles, eventually their loyalty helps them out in numerous ways, surprisingly becoming trustworthy allies. Either way, the series ends on a happy note as Goliath finally understands what it means to be with the family he has now, knowing that there are many gargoyles out there around the world who survived, as well as all of them now being heroes after proving their innocence when saving people from radicals who continue to protest against them. The sad part is, even though she was given many chances, Demona continues to believe that she was still right after betraying the clan for the final time. Losing trust from Angela and failing to be by her side not only caused her to be estrayed from her only daughter, but it also resulted her fate to remain in loneliness filled with greed and vengeance forever. Although Season 3 doesn't quite live up to the climactic conclusion Season 2 did, but this works in its own way. One of the biggest things to note in the series are the heavy themes expressed that no kid of the 90s was going to understand, unless you carefully paid attention or was a teenager or adult. For example, there's the episode where Demona tries to corrupt Brooklyn by making him see the harsh realities of human nature involving death, criminals, and good versus evil. Then you have an instance where Broadway learns about gun control when Elisa accidentally gets shot when he tries to play with her gun, giving us a valuable lesson about gun control. Then there's a factor of education where the Gargoyles are wanting to learn how to read, learning to deal with accepting blindness, and understanding the importance of family after running away. Last but not least, the conspiracy theme of the Illuminati, which I thought was insane, plays a big semi-role throughout the series involving Matt Bluestone and Xanatos. There's just so many plot twists that it's absolutely ridiculous. Aside from those dark themes, there's also some lighthearted, funnier scenarios. For example, you have scenes where the Gargoyles fool around with their new lifestyle being addicted to the TV, well, mostly Hudson and Bronx, and the constant need to go watch movies in the theaters, the entertainment of video games, and discovering how to ride vehicles. And speaking of vehicles, one character that goes by the name Vinny Grigori has his own episode as it takes us into his life since the first interaction with the Gargoyles in the first season, and finally gets his revenge in the final season explaining how the Gargoyles ruined his life. The ending of this episode was just hilarious. Last but not least, the Gargoyles' obsession with eating jalapenos never end and later becomes a constant catchphrase, and one that made me laugh is when Goliath ate one and yelled out jalapenos, making a goofy facial expression. This show is filled with a lot of historical backgrounds and other deep topics like culture, deforestation, and accepting one's heritage. It also contains a plethora of plot twists enough to make you shocked because this was the first cartoon I watched where my jaw actually dropped a few times when certain things unfolded back and forth. The animation is amazing, the voice acting is absolutely superb, there were barely any fillers per se, and definitely a show that needs to be watched a few times to understand, especially when traveling back to Scotland because although it was unfortunately cancelled due to poor ratings at the time, it's extremely informative and now has become a cult classic. Therefore, Gargoyles the Animated Series gets a B+/A. Thanks for watching, give a like and subscribe for more animated series reviews and stay tuned for the next episode.